Okay, welcome to the Inner Circle, the film review podcast where we talk about movies, TV shows. I am your host, Clayton Franklin,
I'm AJ. Happy to be back.
and today we are going to review The Devil All the Time. New Netflix movie came out like I think a week ago, a couple days ago. I don't remember anymore. Time was a steady stream for me. Um, I wanted to review it because I thought it was a pretty interesting movie when I watched it. It was like different than what I was expecting from a normal Netflix movie coming out. So I got AJ to watch it, and he told me that he is not a fan, and I just want to jump right into it and figure out why because he has not told me.
Yeah, dude. So there are films like Schindler's List and Deliverance and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Those are all like really tough movies. Like they deal with a very heavy, deep subject matter. But the thing that movies like Schindler's List and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is, even though they're tragic stories, there's like an aura of redemption around them. And by that, I mean, like, you can get something out of the experience. Like, at the end of the movie, you feel sad, but at the same time, somewhat fulfilled. I didn't get that feeling at all with this movie. I just felt monumentally depressed because it's my personal feelings that this movie is very mean-spirited. And I just, watching it was an excruciating process.
Really?
Yeah, like I have never been so depressed and shocked by a movie in a long time.
I know exactly the feeling you're talking about because I've had that feeling watching some other movies. Of course, I'm going to blank right now and I'm trying to remember which ones, but I felt that way watching some things. This was not one of them that made me feel like that. Um, so just catch up anyone that's like going to click on this and watch this and not know what the movie is, which would be odd, but just in case you don't know. So the movie follows Tom Holland playing Arvin Russell. He's a young man who's orphaned because of like a thing that happens that's I don't want to spoil this early. So it follows this young orphan boy who like lives with his family members and another girl that's like kind of a step sister ish to him that's also orphaned, and they grow up in this weird town with some the weird characters, and it's one of those movies where it's like four or five different stories that like you're like okay they're like different people here, and of course by like the middle and then the end they're all interconnected and things go everywhere. Um, but it is a dark one. It did some things to where like I didn't really expect. Um, I like I try to think of the best way for me to give my thoughts without just saying spoilers because my goodness, some of the things that I saw in this movie.
Yeah, it's really hard to talk about this movie without spoiling anything. Like there are very, very specific moments that have very, we'll say, unique circumstances.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
um,
can say just before we go spoilers for like probably the rest of this, I want to just say straight up, I recommend this movie. When I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, I can't like tone wise. It's dark. I wouldn't say it's like as dark as the examples you gave, but it's a dark movie tone wise. But plot wise, it kind of reminded me of kind of like how Guy Ritchie movies, how not that it's not a comedy like Guy Ritchie movies, but it reminded me of them plot wise, where it's like there's different stories happening that just intertwine, and I just love movies like that. So this one had me on the hook immediately, and I think it being kind of this dark southern like grimy thing really pulled me in. So I would recommend, before we just do spoiler talk, I recommend this movie for like anyone that wants to watch it. Just know like it gets heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend this movie as well, but I would recommend it to a very specific bunch of people. Like if you're a casual moviegoer, or if movies are sort of like a hobby for you, you're gonna want to avoid this one. But if you're like hungry for movies and good lessons to be learned from filmmaking, I suggest you watch this movie to learn how not to edit your story.
Okay, yeah. I can agree with that. Throw up the spoiler tag here. Okay. So just let's start with that editing thing. I thought it was weirdly paced. The first like 30, 40 minutes of this movie, I'm into it. I like Bill Skarsgård's my guy. Like he's pulling this movie along. Like he's owning it. But at the same time, I looked at my watch and I'm like, okay, but like when's like the ball gonna get rolling here?
Yeah, no, I was halfway into the movie, and I was happy to see Skarsgård outside of the Stephen King It movies, because he's got great range, especially in this movie. But I think it was the half-hour mark when I actually texted you and said, "Dude, this movie is excruciating." Like I was in pain, and I didn't even have any idea where any of the story threads were leading.
Yeah, that's the thing. So after I watched the movie, I spent like the evening. I read the first couple of chapters of the book, and the scene structure of the book, it's paced much better. The movie takes what's like Arvin's backstory slash his dad Willard's story, and it kind of just it front loads the movie with like info about the town, and then all of the Willard story, and then like Willard's story over, and then it's like Arvin's story, the rest of it. And I thought that was weird when I was watching the movie because I'm like it feels like a movie starting and stopping, and then starting again, and then going until the end. And I was like, it's odd, you know. Turns out the book spaces it out better, where it starts at like the very beginning, just immediately with the thing where Willard goes and beats up those guys and is like, that's how you take care of people that are mean to you and all that. And then it jumps back to like his meeting the wife and everything. I love that little cameo there. But yeah, so I agree though, the editing and pacing in the movie is a little off. And turns out the book, of course, the original book does fix it. I don't know why they would change it the way they did. It's a little odd.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that this is an adaptation of a book. I did not know that going into this movie. Like I saw the trailer, and the trailer looked good. And when I was watching, because I today watched it, they're very fresh. But I was so confused as to why there was this random narrator that has no relation to any of the characters. Like, why do we need this narration? I feel like the movie would be stronger without it. Turns out that, it's based on a book, so it's like the writer. And I knew that going in, because then it probably wouldn't have bothered me as much.
Yeah, so the opening narration is pretty much like the first paragraph or two of the first chapter of the book condensed down, and telling you about like where things are and what's going on. And I thought like there could have been a way to work it into the story better, because it kind of explains itself as it goes. You don't really need that opening narration. I think they did it because it is a book adaptation, so they took literally the narration like is word for word from the book. And it's narrated by the author of the book, so I think it was just like kind of a thing they wanted to do. Yeah, it was odd. It was a little odd.
Well, also, I'd like to
because
point out that come the ending of the movie and the credit roll, where I learned that it was a book.
mm,
I also learned that Jake Gyllenhaal was one of the producers of this movie, and when I saw that, I was like, "What, Gyllenhaal?"
when I first saw that, I thought, as okay, so
Like I
I
didn't
love,
even know they produced the movie.
yeah, like I love Sebastian Stan playing like the cop in the movie. He does great. Everyone in this movie do great with their parts. But we'll probably get a little bit more into
Oh
different
yeah, no,
characters. But
all the
when I saw
performances.
produced by Jake Gyllenhaal, I was like, I could see him playing the cop. I could see him playing Sebastian Stan's role easily.
Yeah, honestly, probably the most surprising role was Robert Pattinson as the Reverend.
Okay, is that where we're gonna start with characters? Because I have some
So
words on
that's
that
kind of
man.
where I want to start. He's like, I'm heavily following Pattinson now that he's Batman. I'm trying to like get as much, I don't know, Bruce Wayne out of him as I can, just to really feel confident that he can do it. This movie, uh, he really just proves that he's a great actor with great talent and great range. He sort of plays one of the antagonists in the film, and he does such a good job at making you want like you love to hate him,
Yeah,
which
so
was different for Pattinson, I think.
um well, I think I've seen him doing more villain roles than I have good guy roles, but that just might be like the movies I look for. Um but yeah, in this one he's playing like a sleazy, not really a preacher, kind of a predator in disguise as a preacher, going into different backwoods towns for probably I would assume a couple months at a time before he ditches to the next one. Because spoilers, sleeps with everybody's teenage daughters, and it's a little scuffed. But yeah, he
There's a lot of like really awkward. Get out of here. Really awkward like sexual implications in a lot of scenes in this movie. Well, this is kind of where I decided that the editing was really poor. Was there's a character that passes away fairly early in this movie by suicide,
oh, it's
and
fine. We're in spoilers now. You can say it's Willard.
okay, I didn't know if we were going mild or like full spoilers,
Yeah,
but
well, we're just
full
doing it.
spoilers like Skarsgård's character, the dad of Tom Holland's character, was Russell Arvis.
Willard. It's Willard. Willard Russell.
Okay, so Willard commits suicide, and right as young Tom Holland, if we will, discovers the body, it immediately cuts to the Winter Soldier getting a hand job.
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to do with that? How is that supposed to make me feel? It makes me feel uncomfortable. That's what it does.
And I think that's what it was supposed to do, but yeah, it's a weird tone shift from like, oh my God, this guy strung up his kid's dog as a sacrifice so his wife wouldn't die of cancer. His wife dies of cancer anyway, so the kid's mother's dead, and now his dog is dead, which they spend time showing he loves. And then his dad kills himself the night his mother is buried. And I'm processing like these like three scenes back to back, like, holy crap. And then I'm like, I blink and I'm like, oh, Sebastian Stan's getting a hand job. I'm like, oh, okay. And I just like
Yeah,
immediately my
no.
brain's like, wait, what? What am I thinking? What's happening?
So you've probably got a point in saying that it was intentional to create that sort of tone, but like there are moments like that throughout this entire movie, and I find it to be very disruptive. It's like beset by tragedy and then awkward, sort of vulgar scene. Usually that kind of stuff doesn't bother me, but when it's paced and edited this way, it doesn't sit well with me.
Like, kind of like where Roy gets killed after he kills his wife and like goes on the run. He gets killed by the traveling serial killers, and like before you can really think about it, they're just like, okay, and now here's back to like home life with Arvin and the bunch. And I'm like, wait, no, go back to that other thing because this guy, I didn't expect him to just get killed. Okay, never mind. And I was like, all right, yeah.
Yeah, that character felt pretty wasted to me. Like I understand that he's got his purpose, in that like he's Lenore's father, and Tom Holland is Willard's son, and they both die tragically, so they grow up together. Like they're sort of fated to be together. But at the same time, that character makes such a huge impression whenever he's on screen because he's like this insane religious fanatic. And then all of a sudden, he kills his wife and then gets killed hitchhiking with serial killers. It seems to me like some of the most random happenstance events. And I'm sure like that's not the filmmaker's fault. Like that's probably in the book.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, okay. It's a little weird because I don't think the movie, let's see, what was the runtime? The movie's 2 hours and 18 minutes, and I feel like they still needed I hate that okay, I hate the trend of like every Hollywood movie having to be 2 hours and 30 minutes. But I feel like this one would have really helped from having the extra time because you see like you understand why everyone's there and like what role their characters are playing, and like you see the parallels between like Roy being like a weird disturbed fake preacher man, and then later on Robert Pattinson being a disturbed fake preacher man. But I don't feel like there's ever enough time for like any of these characters or the thematic connections between the two like all those years apart to really like be established. You just kind of see it and you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get what's happening.
yeah, like I mean, once the third act sort of arrives, all those threads start to blend together and it starts making sense. But I feel as though this movie should have worked to sort of foreshadow those events a bit clearer early on, because the first hour of this movie I was just not following at all. Are you with someone?
Yeah, it is a little odd, and like it's hard for me to like even try and figure out what my thoughts are because like it's one of those movies where like the plot of the movie is following as many of like all the major points from the book in proper order for the most part like it's supposed to, and it feels like it's missing those little details between everything to connect it all up until like the third act, up until Arvin confronts uh, preacher man in the church. From that point till the end, everything like is finally flowing. But before that, it feels like it's missing the little details between everything, and it's a little rough. But all the actors' performances and just how great the movie is shot and how good it looks, and everyone just tearing up their parts in the best way possible kind of made up for it to me.
I can see that. Like I will say again that the performances are phenomenal. And I haven't talked much about the cinematography, but now that you mentioned it, like yeah, this is a really well shot movie. They really get all of the emotion from every actor just clearly on the screen. They use a lot of like close-ups, I noticed, especially when Robert Pattinson is around. They really like to keep the camera close on his face.
Yeah, he just honestly he steals every scene he's in. Like the oh my god, I'm forgetting what it's called. The church scene where everybody brought food for the their new pastor. and he just immediately singles out like, "Oh, look, here's the poor people's food," and just looks right at him while he's giving this speech about how I'll eat the poor people's food.
That was
Like,
so hard to watch for me.
I know,
Yeah.
man. That's what it was.
So just another example of like, you love to hate him.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, he
Yeah.
steals every scene he's in. Like, I think maybe one of the best acted scenes in the movie, would probably to me is when Robert Pattinson is in the car with what's her name that plays Lenora. That's like that scene is so just uncomfortable and so well done. I'm like, oh.
There are so many scenes that you could just like cherry pick from this movie and put them in r/cringe on Reddit, and it would fit like a puzzle piece.
And that's like to the movie's credit because I know that's exactly what they were going for because it goes with the whole point, like the whole point of the title and the story, the devil all the times, and it's showing all like these dark, nasty parts of, what's normally shown as like peaceful, 50s, 60s Southern lifestyle. But it's like, no, it gets real messed up. That's what, like, the more I think about it, like, I like the movie more and more, even though it's missing some of those little moments that would make it like a really good movie.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I just like I can see why people like this movie. Like there are good things in it, and I understand why you like it. I'm glad that you like it, but I don't know. Ever since I saw Dunkirk, I've had a very cynical experience with movies. I don't know if I like it.
Ever since I saw Dunkirk, I have disliked Christopher Nolan, but we talked about stuff like that in Tenet video, so I don't want to retread that discussion.
Well, like just to touch on it a little bit, like I'm not saying I don't like Dunkirk. I really do like Dunkirk. It's just the whole style of Christopher Nolan, like stringing together all of these different plot threads, like the very end of the movie. I wanted that to be like his thing, and I kind of, but now that I see it in movies like this, I don't feel like it works as well, you know?
Yeah, no, I can understand it because that's what I keep like repeating when I'm trying not to is that yeah, it's a little loose for the most part, like with its connections up until the story ties together. Like the stuff with Sebastian Stan playing the sheriff, his stuff literally up until the final, like the third act, the last like 30 minutes of the movie, he feels out of place
Yeah.
even though you see him as the first responder to like Tom Holland when he's like, yeah, my dad killed himself. It's like he shows up there and I'm like, okay, like he's there for little kid Tom Holland for like one scene. And then the rest of the time he pops in the movie, it's like every now and then he just pops in so you remember he's there, it feels like. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I
You definitely
understand.
care. What did we think of Spider Boy?
His southern accent needed work, but after I got used to hearing it, he did really well.
Yeah, no. I was really impressed with his southern accent. Like it took me aback at first, but it worked for me after a while.
I will say,
I'm glad to see that he's getting work outside.
yeah, uh, I know that Robert Pattinson's southern accent did not do it for me. I watched a movie with some other people, and they also agreed at the end, like, what, like this man was almost a cartoon.
Yeah, he definitely played up the stereotype of the Southern Baptist pastor.
But yeah, like I don't know. It's such a no movie has ever like kind of stumped me like this one has when I'm trying to put thoughts together for it. It's very interesting.
It's definitely a movie that takes a lot of mental, I'll say, dedication to sort of dissect. There's a lot that they deal with here, like the themes. I think the biggest theme in this movie is that you shouldn't take religion, like organized religion, so seriously. Because when you think about it, every character in this movie that puts like a ridiculous amount of blind faith in their religion, it comes out bad for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie about like you're about having strong religious beliefs and strong beliefs in family and close ties with people, and how that kind of stuff can be just deadly.
Yeah. And plus, like, it takes place in a very interesting point in American history. Like, it starts right on the end of World War II and ends right at the beginning of the Vietnam War. So it's sort of like this really, I guess you could say, edgy time in American history. So all these emotions that are being flung out sort of feel appropriate to the time. If you know you study your history and like how, you know, American Christianity is sort of, you know, not as well looked upon back in those days as far as being progressive.
But yeah, I can never tell when either of us is talking because like my Wi-Fi will tell me I'm good, and then one of us will lag, and then I get scared.
I feel you. Working with Zoom is complicated.
Zoom, do not ruin my podcast. But
Well,
yeah, sorry.
on that note, there's like a I see a positive glean from this. You know, I'm a huge history guy also. Like I'm fascinated by history. So I thought this was a really good look into like early to mid 20th century America. I think it was a really well done period piece.
Yeah, that's what the location and the timing of like the story is what had me most interested before I watched it, is because I was like, most movies set in that kind of time period aren't done in this kind of brutal, realistic way. They usually are like more, oh, happy Southern coming of age story kind of things. So that's why
I know what you mean.
yeah. So I was really into the change of pace, even though it is divisive for a lot of people, which kind of is the same as a lot of Antonio I don't even know how you say his last name. It's like Campos. I don't know, but that's regardless. It's the like a lot of his other movies he's made actually, where they're very divisive. Where like either critics will like it or audiences will like it, and the only common ground you'll ever find is that like they're all like well shot, beautiful movies. So I'm like, I was like, well, it's in character with the director.
Yeah, no, I guess when you boil it down, like I have the same problems with this movie that I had with Tenet. Like Tenet was beautifully shot, well acted, but the story I didn't jive with. Same with this movie. I didn't jive with the story mainly because of the editing, but everything else, performances and the cinematography was awesome. I guess that's the trend now.
Yeah, because like we discussed, I don't want to keep this review going on longer than it needs to. because I feel like I've got most of my thoughts on this out. And my thoughts on this, even though I said it's hard for me to think about it, they still are more collected than they were for other movies. Um, but yeah, devil all the time, man.
Yeah, no, I feel like the title is very appropriate, especially when you consider like I don't want to get too pretentious, but when you consider the religious implications of the story of this movie, everyone, all the characters want to claim that God is with them or God is in their presence, but evil is everywhere. So the devil all the time.
Oh yeah, that's what it can get deep. But that goes more into like me thinking about the actual books version, where it's more detailed. So I don't want to like attribute book thoughts I have to the movie, even though I like them both. But yeah, like the title definitely gets deeper because it gets into like it gets into Willard's mentality because of his like war PTSD and how that made him a more religious man and how he instilled that into his son, which led into like his son's reactions to bad things that happened to his family. Like I don't know, it's really interesting to me. I recommend it to people that like I know would be into this kind of story.
Yeah, well, I mean, ironically enough, I think this is a movie that my dad would really enjoy. Mainly because, he's a big history guy too. And he tends to watch like really intense movies that deal with heavy subject matter. Like that's kind of his thing. Like some of his favorite movies are like We Were Soldiers or Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List. I actually got him Schindler's List on Blu-ray for Christmas one year. He loved it.
What a present. But yeah, so uh, I don't know if my internet just dropped or not, but do you have any final words on this movie?
Final words on The Devil All the Time. Um, I guess I'll just summarize my points. Great acting, great cinematography, very heavy subject matter. The editing needs some work. If you like studying movies, give this one a watch. If you're just more of a casual moviegoer, don't bother. But that's really my opinion. So,
All right, I'm about to say mine, and then I'll wrap it up. I recommend this movie. I think like great. It's well shot, greatly acted. The story is good. It's there. It's just it suffers from a thing a lot of other book adaptations do, where they can't fit all the little details in, so it feels a little weaker. But like it's there when you watch it. It's just not as strong as it should be all the way through. But the performances and just the location and the vibe of the movie really just carry it along the whole way through. So I recommend it to people. I think it's dark, but I feel like it's a great watch. And we're not gonna keep the audience here all day like some other videos we've done in the past. This is where I'm gonna put up a picture of like all 4 or 5 different Star Wars videos that are all an hour long. Uh, but yeah, Devil All the Time on Netflix now came out. Yeah, last week. Go watch it or don't. I don't know. I'm not your parents. I don't tell you what to do.
watch it if you dare.